Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to this segment of Coach Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. The reading is Suhi Mahalla Panjwa, Dhan Sohagan Jo Prabhu Pachanai. So if you recall from the previous Sabad, I had suggested that we view terms like Ik Oankar, Prabh, Har as being the ground of all being. And I had suggested that we look at it as an existential matrix. And within this network, we are all nodes, individual nodes, not separate, but within, arising within. So if you think of it that way, then in this Sabad, the individual finite node, namely us, individuals, is being imagined as the bride, Sohagan, while the all-pervading matrix appears as Prabh, the beloved. So the drama that goes on, this cosmic play, is about the bride awakening and recognizing the presence of her beloved, in which she already lives. So Suhi Mahalla Panjwa, Dhan Sohagan Jo Prabhu Pachanai. Blessed. Dhan also means rich, rich in experience. Dhan Sohagan Jo. Blessed is that Sohagan, that bride, the individual. Jo Prabhu Pachanai. Pachanai, to recognize, one that recognizes the Prabh. What does that mean? It means recognizing that it exists within what is called the Prabh. Manne hukam tajhe ab manne. And this bride accepts hukam. That is to say, it harmonizes itself with the natural order that emanates from the Prabh and abandons this idea. Abhiman literally means self-pride, but it means the idea that I'm a separate, autonomous individual self. Prayasyo rati raliya manne. Then, and only then, that is to say, when the Sohagan, as the node, when it has awakened, recognize its true relation with the whole, when the part recognizes itself to be a part of the whole, the presence is already constituted in her existence. That is the recognition. So you see, in the previous Sabad, this Suhagan was actually living in Duhagan mode, under Moh, experiencing itself as independent and separate. Now it knows that I am the one arising within the Prabh, and that fills her with love, because there is union. And it becomes an ethical thing. Manne hukam taje ab manne. So Abhiman is that claim to autonomous authorship that says, I stand by myself, I determine my worth, life should conform to my expectations. But now it knows hukam as the larger relational order within which her life is actually unfolding. Now, this does not mean passive resignation. It simply means relinquishing the illusion that you are the sovereign over the whole network. And that is when it becomes rati, dyed, permeated, saturated. Because the whole is becoming more and more visible. And then the Sohagan begins to carry the quality of the whole, Vadiyai, which we talked about, and Raliya, then there is delight in union. It is a playful thing. It is not an ego thing. And now in the Rahau, Sun sakhiye prab milan nisani, man tan arp taj laaj lukani. Rahau, sun sakhiye. Sakhiye, listen to me, friends. Listen to me telling you about the sign of union. What are the signs of this union? How do they arise? Man tan arp taj laaj lokani. So offer the mind and the body. Abandon concern for public opinion. This is very important because public opinion is, or societal conventions, are what's creating your pride and ego in the first place. And you have to now offer mind and body, offering them back to the whole. It understands that it doesn't exist by itself. So the body is offered when action becomes participation in hukam. Lulaj lukani, the shame or inhibition created by social opinion. Now you see, the social world, what is it doing? It is continually reinforcing this idea of a separate self. It talks in terms of status, image, approval, measurement, you see. And that is what prevents you from recognizing the whole that you're within. But with devotion, the center of value begins to shift. So union becomes visible when the individual no longer claims exclusive ownership of mind and body and no longer allows social opinion to define the meaning of its private existence. Sakhi, sometimes also translated as the senses because they accompany the mind. It could be taken in both ways. Sakhi saheli ko samajhave, this is verse 2. Soi kamave jo prabh pave, sa suhagan ank samave. Explaining, one companion explaining to another. Sakhi saheli ko samajhave. Soi kamave jo prabh pave. Practice only that which is pleasing to the Prabhu. What that means is which is in harmony. You see? Now again, this awakening is also a relational thing. You communicate. You communicate. This is not isolated effort. Sangat, Guru, is what is needed. And soi kamave. Kamave, earning, recognition of the beloved. That is the practice. And what pleases the Prabhu? It is not satisfying the temperamental desires or preferences of a ruler. It means acting in consonance with Vadiyai, Nam, truth rather than deception, compassion rather than cruelty, non-enmity rather than retaliation, humility rather than self-exaltation, participation rather than possessiveness. And the result, Anka Samave, the bride enters the embrace of the whole. The bride is now held in intimacy. The reality that once appeared external, distant, or threatening is recognized as the very ground on which one stands. Verse 3, Garb gaheli mahal na paave. Garb gaheli, the one that continues to be seized by pride, self-importance, egoic, that is to say, mahal na paave, doesn't find that domain where this union is possible. Phir pachataave, later she regrets it. Jab rain bihave, when the night has passed. So here is suggestive vocabulary. The bride in the embrace of the beloved, the night of the wedding. That moment, that sacred moment passes. Karamehina man mukha dukha pave. So without the necessary grace, without that vision, the bride is now being depicted as a manmukh. This is the opposite. This is what happens. Dukha pave, suffering. So Garba Geheli is the same bride, but when it is captured, intoxicated, or possessed by pride. And it's not simple boasting. It is the conviction that I am self-grounded and self-sufficient. That is pride. And because one is absorbed in one's constructed identity, the ego, you don't attain the mahal, literally meaning the celestial palace, meaning the presence is not interiorized. So when the local viewpoint, that is me, claims to be the whole truth, the whole becomes experientially inaccessible. Karamahin doesn't mean without good deeds. It means without the gift of grace. Grace simply means when the whole begins to reveal itself. You see? So if it is not revealing itself to you, you're caught in your own prison. And then the conclusion is a supplication. Beno kari je jana dur. I would make a supplication if I believed the Prab to be distant. But Prab abanasi rahya bharapur, the imperishable Prab, that existential matrix, the inner knower, is pervading everywhere in fullness, in vadiyai. Janananik gave dekh hadur. So what is Nanak doing? He's not making a supplication. He says, I would plead if I thought you were far away. But you're not. I'm not assuming any distance. I am, as a matter of fact, dekh hadur, Jan Nanak gave dekh hadur. I see you immediately present, face to face, right here. So the sabad ends not in a supplication, but in a song. So when distance dissolves, prayer becomes praise. So the Sohagan is no longer calling across a gulf. She sings from within the presence that she has recognized. So the sabad is tracing the transformation from pehchan, recognition, to hukam, acceptance of the larger order, of abandoning abhiman, releasing all claims to independent sovereignty, of offering arpan and recognition, and then finding that embrace. The opposite movement we've seen is garab, absolute, pride, self-pride, manmukh, governed by the mind, meaning the ego, meaning local viewpoint, the presence remaining concealed. So here, the bride is not traveling from the outside to the matrix somewhere. She's simply moving within. So the sabad is, blessed is the bride that recognizes the all-pervading beloved, accepts the larger movement of hukam, and relinquishes the fiction of autonomous selfhood. Offering mind and body, she becomes aligned with the quality of the One, Vadiyai, and enters into an intimacy, the same intimacy that was always sustaining her. Pride creates distance. When the beloved is seen as Hadur, that creates fulfillment and love. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.